My list, and I need to do a PowerPoint, is, but next on my list is seek advice and network. Do what you're doing today. So I decided to seek advice really wherever I could find it. Again, I had never done anything like this, and neither had anyone else I worked with. So I had just joined the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation board, and we met for the first time 2 weeks later. There were 20 people in this room that I'd never met before. And at the end of the meeting, the chair said, "Are there any questions from the new people?" So I raised my hand and I said, "Anybody know anyone who published a book or is interested in publishing a book? And, I want to help JDRF with this project." Well, somebody did. So I had a lunch meeting with someone who had not only written and published a cookbook, but who was in charge of the Novello Festival of Reading that had happened here in Charlotte for several years. As part of the public library, they brought in authors. So that name and meeting led to other names and meetings, and I would call people up and talk over the phone. Who do I know who knows a lot of people? Do you know anybody who can help me? And at this time, I would say things like, "I'm not sure, I'm looking to do," and a couple of wonderful people started correcting me and saying, "Stacy, you're going to do this, and even if you're not, just say you're going to do this. Don't beat around the bush. Don't hint that you might. Just do it." And that really clicked with me. Jump in and go. So that, one of those lunches was with the publisher of South Charlotte Magazine and the cookbook author Peter Reinhardt over at Johnson & Wales. They were encouraging me, even if nothing comes of it, you have to speak of it as if it's going to happen. And that changed a lot for me and kind of gave me the energy I needed to take the next step, which was jump in and go. I called 2 chefs that I knew, better than some of the other chefs in Charlotte, but not close friends. And I said, "Hey, I'm doing this project. I'd love to have you on board. What do you think? Here's my deadline." They said, "Sure." I said, "Okay, great, I guess I'm really doing this now." Got off the phone and went, "Ha ha." But they didn't know, it was great. So that was a lot of fun. Most advice I got from everyone I talked to told me to self-publish. Go ahead and self-publish. But I was resisting that. I was hoping that a publisher would swoop in, give me an advance, so I could get a lot of the stuff done and then give all the money to charity. But when I started to talk to publishers, it seemed as though the timeline was not going to meet up. It would take at least 6 months to really get a contract and things settled. I don't know. Maybe it was a nice way of saying, "See you later, hon." But it seemed to me that if I was going to do this, I would have to do it myself. The problem with self-publishing a cookbook is that it's so different than self-publishing a novel or any other kind of book. You can go online and you can publish 25 copies of your novel on the internet. It'll look great. It might cost you more money than you'd like, but you'll have a nice cover, the typeface will look good, and it really will look nice. The cookbook is very different, and I needed help with the layout, the pictures, the recipes. So then I found my genie in a bottle through all of these conversations, and a lot of you already know her. That's Spark Publications in Matthews and Fabian Pressler. So Fabi helped me break the project into very manageable chunks, taking my big goal and dividing it into a series of smaller ones. She knew what I wanted to do, and she got me there. So that's all from just that networking, seeking advice, and trying to find someone who could help me. Amazingly, I did. I still can't believe it. The next thing that I really needed to learn, and I incorporate now just about every day, is do not be afraid to hear no. How many people here have heard no? We've all heard no. You keep going. Hearing no stinks. But sometimes you have to hear it before you'll hear yes. And if you're not willing to hear no, you will never hear yes. So I use this mantra over and over again. What is the worst that can happen? They're going to say no. Fine. I do think that women have a harder time with this. Now, it's funny. I used to work in television news. If you ever go to a TV newsroom, it's almost primarily young women. Perhaps there are a couple of young guys, but for the most part, you've got a lot of women working in one place. When I'm in radio now, it's almost all men. It's been a very strange shift. I mean, I'm much more used to that dynamic because it's been 10 years. But I try to read a lot on working in that kind of environment. And there's a great op-ed piece by Joanne Littman. She's the former deputy managing editor of the Wall Street Journal. And she says, girls need to have confidence in themselves. We need to tell them this, to not always feel the need to be the passive good girl. In my time as an editor, she wrote, Many, many men have come through my door asking for a raise and demanding a promotion. Guess how many women have ever asked me for a promotion? I'll tell you, exactly 0. 0. I was shocked by that. That made me mad too, really did. It is a risk to ask for something that we want. But we all need to take risks and to realize that we may fail. It is so hard to do, and these are her words, not mine. It is an incredibly hard thing to do, especially for women brought up in a culture that celebrates unrealistic perfection in every sphere, from beauty to housekeeping. And I keep that with me all the time, and I think it helps because we do have unrealistic expectations of ourselves. And I'm not afraid to ask for a raise or a promotion anymore. So don't be afraid to hear no. All right, it's the end of January now in this project. My timeline's kicking along, and no one is calling me back. I have commitments from 30 Charlotte chefs, and no one is making their deadlines. Nobody got my letter, by the way. Initially, I sent out a beautiful letter asking. Not one person responded to that letter. I didn't get one phone call or correspondence back from the letter. I had to call everybody individually. And chefs, I don't know if you know the restaurant business, they are awful. I mean, they're wonderful people. But they're always working. They're never near their actual phone. Sometimes they have their cell phone with them. And their hours are a mess. I know because I'm married to one, so they're wonderful people. But it's very difficult to get a hold of them. So I had to hound these people for months. My February deadline moved to March and then April. And then I had to, get a few stragglers in by May. 2 people said yes and never followed through. But that's okay. That happens. I was glad it was only 2. Then Phoebe kept telling me, you need to find someone to write the foreword. Who's going to write the foreword to your book? This needs to be somebody good. I came up with a few names, and then I decided I would ask, at that time, Carolina Panthers coach John Fox. We know each other like this because we had both been involved in JDRF, even before my son's diagnosis. And I see him at events where the radio home the Carolina Panthers, so I had this much of a relationship. But this was a big deal. So I asked around, how do you even do a foreword? How does someone, this is before I realized that a lot of books are ghostwritten. So, I didn't really know a lot about the publishing industry at this time. I'm at home, writing everything myself, which is great. I'm glad I did. It was wonderful. But I found out that, well, you know what? If you help someone with the foreword, they may be more inclined to help you by putting their name on it. So I put that in the back of my brain. Coach Fox has type 2 diabetes, which he had not announced yet at that time. He had told a couple of people on JDRF board, but he had not yet announced it. And I thought, well, this would be an interesting outlet for him. So I found out he would be at a Touchdown Club luncheon, which my radio station goes to quite a bit. I wrangled a seat. I brought my husband along for moral support. And then I tried not to look like a stalker, but I watched him every second of that lunch. I saw a free moment, and I pounced. I calmly, I think, walked over. I really was nervous, even though we already knew each other. But I figured, what's he going to say? He could say no. He probably would say no. I had also found out the name of his personal assistant. I had not yet called her, but I had called around and found out that she was wonderful. So when I asked him, he kind of looked at me and I said, I bet Linda will help with this. Thanks, Linda, for volunteering. And then he looked at my co-host, Jim Zoki, who does sports. And he looked at him and said, what do you think, Jim? Should I do this? Jim Zoki, he had no idea what I was even asking. And he said, it's Stacy. Of course you should do it. It was great. He said, sure, I'll do it. It's for charity. I'll do it. Just let Linda know what I need to do. So I was so relieved. I was so excited. It was such a funny thing. I mean, you do think in your head when these things happen that they're going to be about official contacts and written requests. And it doesn't work like that. It's just by networking and relationships and timing and not being afraid to go and ask. Oh, and by the way, I was so nervous I did forget to mention it was for charity, and Jim standing next to me had to elbow me and say, don't forget. So it was done. And I don't really like that expression, fake it till you make it, but I like my mother's advice. I grew up just outside of New York City. We were kids, we'd go into the city about once a month. My dad worked there. And from the time we were little, maybe 6 or 7 years old, theater shopping, walking around, and anytime we had to go to the bathroom, my mother would always take us to a really fancy hotel and just walk in. And she'd say, pretend we're staying here. And if you act with confidence and like you belong, she would say, no one will question you. Okay, it worked. And so that was my mom's way of moving through interesting situations, let's say. And 9 times out of 10, it really does work, and I still think about it all the time when I'm in any kind of situation. Again, I don't think it's about faking it, but I do think sometimes it's about knowing that you've done things like this before, you can do them again, act like you belong, and you'll get there. All right, I did make a really big mistake in this, which I'll share because we're all such good friends. I was overly optimistic when I printed the book. As a self-publisher, that was my decision alone. I'll take the blame. But early on in the production, we had a 2 to 3 week period where we had to decide how many books to print. I was supposed to make an appearance on the CBS Early Show, which would have been amazing. It was going to be part of a Charlotte event that summer with Johnson & Wales and with WBTV. It was all set. We had the date, we had the satellites, we had everything booked. And then there was a hurricane, and the weatherman who was supposed to come out and do the appearance had to go cover the actual weather. So that was very disappointing. I also thought we were going to get on the Food Network. There was a reality show which they still had, America's Worst Cooks. And they had no name for it, but they came to Charlotte for auditions. I had gone very far through the audition process, and they loved the book, and that didn't happen either. So both appearances fell through. It was a disappointment, but it was wonderful. It was a lot of fun. I made a lot of great contacts, which I hope to use next time around, perhaps.